Hello, everyone. Welcome to another erotically charged episode of It Crept from the 80s. This episode, folks, it's got some 80s in it, but it's got some other stuff in there as well. So when I do these live shows, I do a lot of Q&A, and this last live show that I did, we started to talk about music. And, I got a few people who were asking what I listen to, or how do I choose the music in my films. And that aspect of it, I will do a video on its own, as far as the music in my movies are concerned. So this episode, I just wanted to focus on the music that I, Chris Seaver, love, and or like. And I'm sure it's going to, ruffle some feathers, or people will be shocked by some of it. But I'm, very honest in everything that I love and or like. I think the idea of getting angry or fighting someone over the things that they like as opposed to the things that they don't like is pretty ridiculous. And, the internet is full of shit like that. Opinions are opinions, and you can like what you like and you can not like what you like. And that's just life on anything, not just pop culture. I've certainly had ridiculous but fun, conversations slash rants and arguments with my friends about the things that I love and don't like, and vice versa. But it's always fun. It's never gotten to where it's like ridiculous and, what? You like that? Fuck you, I hate you, get out of my life. That type of bullshit. You're calling you out because you like or don't like something. So this is honest, as in everything that I do, movies, pop culture, everything. It's just, this is mine. This is the stuff that I love. This is the stuff that I listen to. I don't care what anybody thinks about it. Why should I? Just as I wouldn't care about anything else that anybody else listens to or watches or anything like that. Who cares? But people want to know. And anybody who knows me, friend, family, both, intertwined, pain and pleasure, indivisible, know that I have pretty much stayed very consistent since I was a youngin'. So I'll give you a little bit of context as far as where I'm coming from music-wise. If you've followed the channel, you know some of this stuff already. But so I was born in 77, and growing up in the 80s, to me, it is the best decade of everything. And certainly music, as far as I'm concerned. And my mother was young when she had me. My uncles, her brothers, that group of family, really shaped my tastes growing up as a young lad. So very early on, I was watching and listening to a lot of crazy stuff. And so my mom and my uncles and they would just really like either deliberately like play stuff for me to get into, or it was just playing all over the place when I was around these human beings growing up. And then on top of that, you had MTV, you had the radio, and this music was just everywhere. So I I have not changed. The music that I listened to when I was a kid is the same music that I listen to now. And you can ask, if you talk to anybody who knows me, this is 100% true. I'm very particular. I'll have no problem telling other people that the music they like is garbage. you know, but I would expect them to not give a shit, because so what? Um, and it's the same with me when people tell me, what, you like this, you like that. I'm just like, yeah, man, I do. In general, with music and movies and things of this nature, pop culture in general, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I think you either like it or you don't. Um, you shouldn't feel guilty for anything that you love, and that's just how it is. So, primarily, what I listen to this day is 80s music, and that can be artists that I really love from the 80s and just songs that I love from the 80s. I'm also still a physical media person. I still buy CDs, I buy records, and I buy tapes. Um, yeah, I have MP3s, and my phone uh, is filled with music, um, and it's filled with the music that I'm about to talk about. Everything on my phone is everything that I had listened to back in the day, or you know, pro- progression throughout the years and glommed onto and still listen to. I do not listen to modern music. I think it's pretty bad. There isn't really a modern artist today or in the last 20 years or more that I really like. I'll bring up one, um, and that's just because of the style that it is. There's a couple. Okay, there's a couple. Let's say Chromeo. Chromeo started in the early 2000s, and it's just two dudes, and they do electro funk synth, 80s funk, but today, but modern, and it's awesome, and I love them. I think they're fantastic, and that music in general is rad. It's so good. So I listen to Chromeo. And then there's the one dude like Bruno Mars. Okay, not all of Bruno Mars. Hell no. But when he hits on the sounds of the late 70s and 80s with some of his music, then it really speaks to me. I gravitate towards it. Um, but there really isn't, I think the music that is just generally observed as good music of the day is pretty repugnant. Um, I'm also going to say this, which again, this is just my opinion. You got yours, and that's okay. You can love it, and it's all you. I think, and this is a general swath of the decade overall, and people will know this of me, but I really do not like the 90s at all. Um, yes, there are some movies that I love from the 90s. Yes, there's some TV that I love from the 90s. Um, there ain't music. I think the music of the 90s is pretty abhorrent. I hated it then, and I still hate it to this day. Um, Now, I'm going to be talking about ska, and you can say, well, ska was the 90s. Ska was not the 90s. There was a revival of ska in the 90s, but ska has been around since the 50s. So, um, and I was listening to ska without knowing that it was the ska genre in the 80s. And then around 93, I realized that this was a whole genre with the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. And oh, I was listening to Madness and the Specials and Oingo Boingo, without knowing that it was a straight up ska thing, you know? Um, but grunge, the rock that was coming out of it, uh, techno, hip hop, all of that shit, garbage. I think it's all fucking terrible. And like I said, I hated it then and I hate it now. I never liked it. I think it's all pretty terrible music. So you ain't gonna hear any of that shit from me. I'm not gonna be talking about Nirvana or Soundgarden or any of that trash. I think it's trash. I think it's really bad. So I don't like it. Oh, I did like Weezer. I like the first two albums that Weezer put out. Um, uh, but that's about as far as I'll go. 90s music. So I'm gonna list you off. Now these are some of the bands and artists, that I loved then and I love now, and they are on my playlist. Every one of these bands and things that I'm about to talk about is still in my playlist today, and I still, collect the physical media of. I just have never really changed. So I love Madonna. I love Cyndi Lauper. Uh, I love Prince. I love Michael Jackson. Um, I love John Cougar Mellencamp. I love Rod Stewart. I love the Talking Heads. I love the Cars. God damn. The Police. I love the Police. I love a lot of new wave as well. So I like the Human League. Of course, I love Oingo Boingo. That is my favorite band of all time. They always have been. I love the Monkees. I grew up watching the television show, the reruns. I had records of the Monkees. I just love the Monkees. In that sort of vein, I love some of the Beatles. Not all, but I love some Beatles songs. I think I could probably fill a CD of Beatles songs that I really enjoy, and that's mostly the earlier stuff. I really don't like when they get psychedelic and go weird and crazy. I don't like any of that stuff. I like some of Elvis. I like some of Elvis's tunes. I like 50s doo-wop. I like 50s dip dip, that type of but I like the groups, the singing groups, and I like 50s music like that. Always have. Let's see. I love AC/DC. Huge AC/DC fan, actually. Like I said, I like new wave. So I was also big in soundtracks. So I had the Breakin' soundtrack. I like that shit. I like New Edition, early New Edition. I like the Jets. Lisa and Cult Jam. I like that. I liked Queen. Again, a lot of this was a mix of my mom and my uncles and just the music of the day, certain bands, certain songs will take me back, and I can remember when I first heard that song, or a moment from back then that song was playing, or I was listening to that album. Like my first cassette ever was the Thriller cassette, when that came out. And I'll always remember that. One of my first record albums that I owned was Madness, and it was a compilation. It was like a best of Madness. I probably was 11 in '88 or something like that. Now this stuff, so like the more heavy, the metal-y stuff is totally like my mom and like one of my uncles and then my mom's husband at the time. So I listened, so it was just prevalent. So I listened to a lot of Dio. It was on, and I loved Dio. Van Halen, you know, Metallica and Megadeth. I like Metallica a lot more, but there's about an album's worth of songs from Megadeth that I like. Cinderella, I liked. Um, but yeah, so Queen. Um, let's see, Guns N' Roses when they came out, that was a big deal, and all of us kids had, we got the tapes or it was tapes. We didn't get CDs in Wellsville probably until 1990. So when Appetite for Destruction came out, it was tapes. So we got that. But I listened to the specials because of Madness. I listened to Primus. I was a big Primus fan. Still am. Again, all of this stuff is still very prevalent in my life to this day. They Might Be Giants. Huge. I love They Might Be Giants. And again, some of the stuff you just might be like, what? Really? But yeah, again, their first album on cassette I got. The very first They Might Be Giants tape that went worldwide. I got that tape growing up. Let's see. Oh, and as I said, I was a big soundtrack kid. I love soundtracks. So Ghostbusters, Breakfast Club, Back to the Future, Bill and Ted, Footloose, the Batman soundtrack, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I loved any of the Muppets. I had the Revenge of the Nerds soundtrack on tape. I had Dragnet, the soundtrack to Dragnet from the movie on tape. I had the tape to Earth Girls Are Easy, the soundtrack. Labyrinth. Fright Night. Fright Night is my favorite horror movie of all time, and the soundtrack is awesome. Young Guns 2, that soundtrack. I like a lot of soundtracks. The Last Dragon, great soundtrack. I was a movie kid as well. Like, I grew up going to the theater all the time with family and friends, and so the music of the movies were like Conan the Barbarian. The fucking soundtrack to that is amazing. Of course, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, the John Williams stuff. E.T. was a big soundtrack for me. So I love that stuff and still do. I have a lot of soundtracks. I have all those soundtracks in addition to, I like a lot of horror soundtracks as well. The score to Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Whew! Love those soundtracks. Little Shop of Horrors. I love that soundtrack. Big time. I like the Ramones. I like the Ramones a lot, and the Misfits. I'm not like a big. As far as like true, honest to goodness punk music, those are the two bands that I like. I don't really like punk music in general. You can say, well, you like ska punk. Well, I like ska punk because it's ska as well. But like, I don't, punk really isn't it wasn't a big thing for me. I think I said Cyndi Lauper. Yeah. I also, I don't, so the only rap that I like is pretty much 80s rap. I didn't like when the 90s were happening and the gangster rap was coming in. I didn't like any of that. Um, I like I love the Beastie Boys. I love Run DMC. I love DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Um, so that's the stuff that I listen to, and I have to this day. Um, so when like I said, for the ska thing, um, I was listening to the specials and Madness and the English Beat and Oingo Boingo, who did, Oingo Boingo is everything. Oingo Boingo is like new wave, rock and roll, a little bit of metal here and there, and ska, and it's all sort of thrown into this mix of awesomeness. And so that was all prevalent, and of course, like a lot of the soundtracks, like I said, that I loved. A lot of this stuff was on there, like 16 Candles, that soundtrack. It's amazing. Weird Science. But, you know, so so I'm listening to this stuff, not knowing that it's a genre called ska. And then in 1993, I discovered the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. And that sort of like, phew, you know, I was like, ska core, what ska core, looking more into it. I'm like, oh, okay, like, so that's what this is. It's ska, but this is a different ska. So, and that, and then I remembered like, I used to love the video for Party at Ground Zero, and that was Fishbone. And so that was like ripping through my head. That first EP from Fishbone, my Uncle John had that cassette. And so I was like, oh, I listened to Fishbone. Like, I know what Fishbone was. And so that's what this was, this whole ska thing. I was like, oh my God, like, I love this music. And now I can discover more. And that's what I did. Once that happened with the Mighty Mighty Boss Towns, I was on a roll. I was talking to anybody and everybody who I could. I had this friend, Emily, who was a punk chick in high school. Middle school, high school, that's when I sort of started hanging out with her. And she had all this stuff. She had a lot of ska. And so through the Boss Tones, I became hooked on the Toasters. And let's see, I loved Rancid. And so again, the punk stuff that Rancid was doing, I listened to Energy first from Operation Ivy, and then she was like, oh, and they did Rancid. And they really didn't push their ska stuff in Rancid until 95. But so I loved Rancid. I love anytime Rancid does ska, I think it's just fucking killer. Like Tim Armstrong is a huge ska person, and it's just gold every time they do it. So I fucking love ska, and so I loved Rancid. Like I said, the Toasters, Fishbone, the Mustard Plug, Big D and the Kids Table. The Siren Six are an amazing ska band. They're not together anymore. They didn't last very long, but holy shit, were they amazing. The Skoydats, Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake, Suicide Machines. But when I first heard them, they were called Jack Kevorkian and the Suicide Machines, and they're just called Suicide Machines. Anything that Mike Park was doing, so I really loved Skink and Pickle, and then he did the Chinkies, and then he did the Bruce Lee Band, and he started Asian Man Records. But all of that ska and that ska family is amazing. MU330 is amazing. Some of the best right there with Rancid, some of the best punk ska is Slapstick. Again, they didn't really last, but holy shit, that is some great ska punk. Skoydats, the Smooths, I liked. The Independents. The Independents are awesome. They're like a mix of the Misfits and ska, So it's horror and the vocal tones of like Elvis mixed with Danzig, but it's ska. You know, I like I like the independents a lot. Some of the newer bands that I really like. Um, oh, on the older side of things, I love dancehall crashers. I wish they were still a thing, but whoo, whoo, I love those guys. Um, and then around 2011, the Interrupters came out, produced by Tim Armstrong, Hellcat, and all that stuff. And the Interrupters are an amazing ska punk band. I really like Catbite and Bite Me Bambi for some of the modern ska that's out there. Um, but yeah, so uh, and as I said, Chromeo and um, Bruno Mars, sort of the modern stuff. But it's because they're doing like '80s sounding stuff that I really enjoy. Um, but and then throwing in with the metal stuff. So I talked about this on my Guar episode down on the channel, but so it was around '92 or so when I first heard Guar, thanks to Mike Gianelli, and he sort of playing me some Guar and Phallus in Wonderland, showing me Phallus in Wonderland. Um, and I could probably fill a CD with all the songs that I do like from Guar. Um, but I love Guar more for their artistry and their creativity and wackiness and stage antics and their costuming and their theatrics and stuff like that. But I definitely listen to their music, and as going into the 2000s, early 2000s, I really started getting into fantasy metal, and to an extent, Dio was that in the '80s, and I was listening to that. But this was far more. This was like symphonic, and that really started to grab a hold of me as well. So bands like Rhapsody and Blind Guardian and Nightwish, um, I still listen to, and I really enjoy. And and then on the goofy side of it, Manowar. So I love I love the sword and sorcery fantasy genre in general, and then you just throw metal into that mix, and it's Halloween, things like the power metal stuff is great. That stuff really appeals to me. But yeah, that's the music, guys. That is literally Chris Seaver's music from the '80s to now. As a you know, I'm gonna be 46 in a few months. This is the music that I listen to this day. That's it. I don't really jump outside the box. If there is something that happens to appeal to my ears and perk me up and, sort of hits that sensibility of things that I like, then I'll bring it into the mix. But for the most part, all those bands, all that music that I mentioned is Chris Seaver's playlist. That's it. Um, and so, I hope you enjoyed listening to that. I hope now you get a sense of the music that I enjoy, and what speaks to me musically. And again, well, I mean, you know what? Maybe I don't have to do a separate video about this because it wouldn't be very long. But so any of you guys who don't know, I have been making comedy horror films since I was in the '80s. I got a video camera in '84. I started making backyard movies, but really started taking it seriously in 1991, and that's when I called it Low Budget Pictures. So I've been making flicks under Low Budget Pictures since 1991, and fans of my movies have always asked, like, what's this music, what's this song, what's this band in a lot of my stuff. And I just, when I'm writing scripts, I listen to a lot of the stuff that I like. And throughout the years, I've just been lucky enough to, be able to use a lot of that. Some of it, you have to license and you got to pay for it. And then some of it, like I said, I've just been like, hey, yeah, you can use this stuff. In 95 to 98, I had a ska band called the Swanky Modes, which was a reference to a fake band that's in one of my favorite comedies, Tapeheads. So I had this band, and we recorded two albums worth, 2 cassettes. We didn't have CDs, we had cassettes of them. But we played with a lot of ska bands that I loved. And on these bills, when we would play with these bands, I would also bring a lot of my movies and I would give them to the bands for them to like watch on the road when they're on tours and whatnot. And so I became friends with a lot of the ska stuff that was going on in those days. And so I was lucky enough to get permission to use so much of that stuff in my films. And so I prefer just to sort of offset a lot of the weirdness. Well, not really offset, but complement a lot of the weirdness in my flicks. I use a lot of ska, I also use metal and synthy stuff, like the synthwave stuff, like John Carpenter-y type stuff, which is also amazing, and I listen to. Being a big soundtrack guy, John Carpenter's films and that music was always fucking amazing. But I mean, just the 80s horror in general, you were getting a lot of synthwave spookiness, and so I very much enjoy synthwave as well to this day. But it's 80s music to me. It's just part of the decade and the stuff that I love. So, but yeah, so that's it. I mean, I guess if there's specific songs or tracks that people want to come to me if they're watching a movie and they're like, hey, what is this? What is this? I'll gladly answer those questions. But I can't pinpoint everything that I've used and everything. So, yeah. So there we go, guys. That's it. That is my very quick music episode of A Crep from the 80s of the music that Chris Seaver loves. So now you know. So we'll see you on another creamy and delicious and erotic yet poignant episode of It Crept from the 80s.